I, like a lot of other people, have been trying to not watch the news. I don't have social media, but I've been trying to not engage in any conversations about the recent events because I'm preparing for the bar exam, and I know that I have a tendency to get wrapped up in things and not focus. But today, while I was taking a lunch break, a lot of things were really heavy on my mind, and so I just want to express them. And for those of you that are anything like me, I like people to know what I'm going to say so they can kind of pay attention and follow. So with that being said, there's just a few things that I want to address. The first thing I want to address is the law and what the law says about deadly force, i.e. shooting people. The second thing that I want to talk about is statements that people make, like he should have just complied or he should have not resisted, and things like that. The third thing I want to talk about is Black Lives Matter and what that means. And then the last thing is black on black crime. So taking first what the law says. I have respect for the law. That's the reason I want to be an attorney, because I believe that the law is necessary to keep order in our communities. And the minute that you stop applying the law equally, the minute that you stop requiring everybody to follow law, there's a lack of order. There's a lack of control. There's people running around like they're crazy. So what the law says about deadly force is you can use deadly force. I know a lot of you guys know this, but you can use deadly force when confronted with deadly force. That means that if we're in a fist fight, like Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman were in a fist fight, even if I'm getting beat up, I don't get to pull out a gun or a knife because you were beating me up, because I escalated the situation beyond what it was just a fist fight. That's what self-defense is. So when you have an officer that isn't confronted with deadly force, when their life isn't in danger, when it's not necessary to protect their own life to use deadly force, then that force shouldn't be used. That means when you ask someone to get their license and you can see their hands and they're reaching for their license, you don't shoot them just because they reach for their license, because you're not in danger. When you are standing over someone and they're restrained or they're pinned down, just because you believe or you're alleging that they were reaching for a gun, you're not in danger yet. And the biggest concern I have with that is police officers, they take an oath, they take physical tests, they take written tests. And when you go through that process and you become a police officer, the belief and understanding by your community, by the people that allow you to become an officer, the belief and the understanding is that you're capable of protecting us. And so if I think you're capable of protecting me, why do you have to have a gun to just do your job? Because if Alton Sterling was resisting arrest, then why don't you just do your job and restrain him? Your job doesn't require you to shoot him. And if you believed that Philando Castile was reaching for his gun, you ask him to get out the vehicle with his hands up where you can see them to make sure that you're safe. And then you can put handcuffs on him. You have these things that you can do to protect yourself. You're trained to protect yourself. And that training doesn't only consist of pulling a trigger, because any coward, any person on the street can pick up a gun and pull a trigger. That's not what you get trained to do. And so my point with the law is in effect for a reason. It applies to everybody equally. The law doesn't say, if you're black, this is a crime. If you're white, this is a crime. If you're a police officer, this is a crime. What the law says is this is a crime. And when the prosecutor proves that, when anybody proves that you committed that crime, then there's penalties for it. And so just because these are police officers, they shouldn't be above the law. Because the minute that you don't hold them accountable, you have black men's lives being taken like it's nothing, and there's no consequences for that. The second thing I want to address is the implications of statements like, he should have just complied. He shouldn't have resisted arrest. Well, let me tell you what that says, the implication of a statement like that. The implication is you can die if you resist arrest. You can die if you don't comply. I personally have had contact with police officers just in random situations. Like, me and my friends were having a party and officers said that we were too loud when I was in college. Do you know how many of us talked back to them? Do you know how many of us said, well, the music isn't that loud, who complained? By you saying they should have just complied. That's like you saying we should have just got shot because we didn't immediately do what the officers told us to do. We didn't immediately go upstairs and turn the music off. That's a problem. anytime you live in a free country like America and there's an implication being made that the penalty for not complying is getting shot, that's a problem. That's an issue, a huge, huge issue, because that's not the way it works. And the same thing goes for people. When Sandra Bland died, people were saying she should just put out the cigarette. She should just did this. She should just did that. Well, okay, so that means that if I'm walking down the street smoking a cigarette and I see a cop, I need to just put it out. Because if I don't put it out and I somehow get arrested and I end up dead, guess what? I should have just put the cigarette out, right? That's a problem. And when you say things like that, when you imply that these things are punishable by death, you're placing a very, very low value on human life. And the same thing goes for when people bring up a criminal history. The implication of that is, because you committed crimes, I don't care if you're dead. Well, I have two approaches to that depending on what you believe. If you're a Christian, when that person asks for forgiveness, they're no longer, God doesn't hold them accountable for that anymore. There's consequences. Well, let me not say he doesn't hold them accountable, but they're forgiven. The rest of their life isn't doomed. God doesn't kill them instantly and say you sinned. But if you're not a Christian, just look at it from a practical point of view, that when you commit crimes, you go to jail, and you go to jail to be rehabilitated. And there's programs for ex-cons to help them get back accustomed to living in their community. And the idea is you don't want a stigma on them. You don't want them walking around and people judging them because they committed crimes in the past. That's the reason you have lobbyists that don't want the box on job applications. Check this box if you're ex-con, because it's a stigma, and you don't hire them because they're ex-con, but the whole idea is for them to get back into society. So they've paid their debt to society. But when they get killed, you bring that up as if that's justified. So this is what that implies. That means when I got a citation 3 years ago for fighting, if I died tomorrow, somebody's going to say, oh, I mean, she look at what was on her record. She was fighting. She was a heathen. Or if you got a DUI 10 years ago, if you did anything in your past that ended up on your record, it's okay to die. It's cool because you got a criminal past. That's not okay. Now, Black Lives Matter. Okay, so I hear a lot of people say, all lives matter. You shouldn't just focus on one group. Well, this is what I have to say about that. Any of these people that's saying all lives matter, have you ever been told that your life didn't matter? Have you ever been made to feel like your life didn't matter? Have you ever feared that your life isn't valued the same way that somebody else's life isn't valued? Have you ever felt that your accomplishments aren't enough because you're Black? Have you ever felt like what you do isn't recognized just because you're Black? Serena Williams, I could go on about her accomplishments, but we're all familiar with her. Guess what she's criticized for? Oh, because she looks like a gorilla and she looks like an ape. And Gabrielle Douglas won an Olympic medal. And guess what everyone talked about? Her hair. Do you know what they have in common? They're Black. And their accomplishments are being overshadowed because someone nitpicks and finds something wrong with what we do. When you accomplish things in some type of way, it's not enough. Is that something that you experience? Is it something that you go through? Does society constantly tell you that what you do isn't good enough? Has there been a history in this country of your people being mistreated and your people being sprayed and beaten like dogs and your people being targeted to be killed? If not, then that's the reason why we're not saying all lives matter, because no one is alleging that your life doesn't matter and no one is treating you like your life doesn't matter. So it's not necessary to remind people every day that your life matters, because I think what society has shown us is they get it. They get that everybody else's lives matter, but what they don't get is that our lives matter. What they don't understand is that our lives are valuable, just like your lives are valuable. So the analogy that I can think of is breast cancer awareness stickers. So people have a hashtag #FCancer. When someone says F cancer, do you get on their Facebook or their Instagram or wherever you see the hashtag? Do you get upset and say, F all sicknesses, lupus matters, lung disease matters? No, you don't say that, because inherent in that hashtag is not that they don't care about every other sickness. What it means is they support people that suffer from that sickness, whether it's because their relatives have suffered from it, whether it's because It affects them personally. The idea is it's a symbol. It's a symbol as something that they believe in, something that they support because they want people to know they support it. So when I say Black Lives Matter, when anyone says Black Lives Matter, we're not saying your life doesn't matter. What we're saying is this country hasn't seemed to recognize that our lives matter. Police officers don't seem to recognize that our lives matter. So we want to remind them that they do. Let us have our moment. Let us do us for a second. Just please don't steal our shine. We're not saying that you don't matter, and we're not saying that we only matter. We're saying that at this point in time, the state of this country, the things that are going on, it's necessary to remind people on a regular basis that Black lives matter. Our lives matter. Our brothers, our sisters, our uncles, our fathers, our nephews, they matter. And the last thing I want to address is Black on Black crime, because people say all the time, well, you don't get mad about Black on Black crime. Well, this is the reason I'm not mad about Black on Black crime, because that's a consensual situation. Those are people engaging in activities that could result in harm to them. So I have another analogy. If you and I are getting in a fight and you just so happen to get the best of me, I don't get to go sue you for battery because I consented to whatever happened. When I engaged in a confrontation with you, I consented to whatever contact that was going to happen to me in response for me engaging in that confrontation. So Black on Black crime, I'm going to speak about it from my point of view. You live by the sword, you die by the sword. That's what the Bible says. So if you are engaged in activities, if you live your life in a way where harm will result, I'm not going to protest on your behalf because you put yourself in a position. And again, if you're not Christian, it's just basics. If you walk to somebody's house and shoot them, or if you and somebody are arguing or going back and forth, or whatever the situation may be, no, I'm not going to protest about that. That is completely different than someone with his hands up, reaching for his wallet that he was asked for and getting shot dead with a child in the back seat. That's different than someone being on the ground on his back and getting shot. These are all different situations. It's different than a grown man finding a teenager and pulling out a gun and shooting them. It's different. And you can't compare the two. You can't compare the two. That would be like me saying, hey, everybody that's opposed to Donald Trump, you don't get to say you're opposed to Donald Trump because you didn't say you was opposed to George Bush and he was a shitty president too. Do you see how that doesn't make sense? One thing has nothing to do with the other. Just because you're not upset about one bad president, don't mean you can't be upset about another one. Just because I'm not upset about my people killing each other, doesn't mean I can't be upset about someone who's charged with upholding the law, who's charged with protecting me, taking their lives without justification when they're not threatened. So, I say all that to say, be mindful of the things that you say. Be mindful of the situation that a person saying Black Lives Matter. Be mindful of the fear that they may be in. Be mindful of what they may be going through. Stop to think about what that means to them and why you can't identify. And the last thing I want to say is Black Lives Matter, pro-Black don't mean anti-police. I don't condone, I don't agree with, I think it's terrible what happened to those police officers. And I don't think things like that should continue happening. I think it sends a backwards message the same way capital punishment does. Okay, killing people is bad. So to punish you for killing somebody, I'm going to kill you too. I think that's backwards. I think it doesn't make sense. But what I also think that is, we got to stop justifying things. We got to stop making it seem like it's okay. This is not okay. It's not okay. It's not okay. It's not okay. And the first step to fixing a problem is acknowledging that there is a problem.